Have you ever just watched a brilliant person, maybe someone with a PhD or a person who runs a massive company, or just a friend you deeply respect fall for a completely obvious, ridiculous, easily disprovable fake narrative?
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time.
Right, and you just sit there watching them passionately defend this idea, and it makes you wonder, like, if raw intelligence and advanced degrees and sheer processing power aren't enough to protect us from being manipulated, what is?
It really is the defining paradox of the modern era. I mean, we are walking around with the equivalent of the Library of Alexandria in our pockets.
Yeah.
We have access to more raw data, more historical context, and just more real-time information than any generation in the history of the human species.
Which is staggering when you think about it.
It is. And yet, if you look at the societal landscape, we are arguably more confused, more easily manipulated, and just more aggressively divided than ever before.
And that's exactly why you're listening to this right now. You obviously care about your cognitive diet. I mean,
Right.
you consume enormous amounts of information every single day.
All right, we all do.
You're reading articles, scrolling through feeds, listening to discussions, taking in literally terabytes of data. But the hard truth we are going to confront in our deep dive today is that having the data is completely useless if you lack the filter.
Exactly. The filter is everything.
Very few of us actually possess a reliable cognitive mechanism to, evaluate the truth, the internal coherence, and the moral direction of the ideas that are just flooding our brains.
Well, the fatal assumption of the information age is that more information automatically yields better understanding.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it doesn't. Without a structured framework to process it, more information simply creates a denser fog. It leads to cognitive overload.
And what happens when we hit that overload?
Here's the biological reality. When the human mind is overloaded, it does not become smarter. It just defaults to its most basic, primitive, and reactive instincts.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring the fascinating and honestly somewhat unsettling work of Jamie Thornberry on metacognition and what is termed cognitive renewal.
Yeah, it's brilliant work.
We're basically going to learn how to actively debug the mind.
I think debugging is the perfect framing here, because the core thesis of Thornberry's work shifts the blame in a very validating way, I think.
How so?
Well, the crisis of misinformation and manipulation we face, it isn't happening because people are inherently foolish or lack brain power. The deficiency is in reflective awareness.
Right.
It's a structural vulnerability in how we process thought, not a lack of raw intellectual horsepower.
Okay, I want to unpack this right from the start because the sources introduce this central framework that sounds, I'll be honest, a little philosophical or esoteric at first glance.
Sure.
It's called the Triadic Audit of Love, Light, and Life. And when I first read that, my immediate reaction was, is this poetry or is this psychology?
That is a very fair reaction.
Yeah.
The terminology, love, light, life, it carries a lot of poetic and historical baggage.
It really does.
But in the context of Thornberry's work, you have to view this as a highly functional, rigorous, three-part cognitive filter. It is not mystical at all. It is structural.
So how does it actually function?
The Triadic Audit is basically a diagnostic tool. It's designed to force the mind to pause and interrogate any belief or narrative.
Yeah.
It demands that you ask three unforgiving questions.
Okay, let's hear them.
Does this align with love? Does it reveal light, meaning epistemic truth? And does it promote life, meaning human flourishing?
Will you push back on that slightly?
Go further.
Because if I'm evaluating a complex piece of geopolitical news or new scientific study, asking if it aligns with love feels incredibly subjective. I mean, how is that a rigorous test?
We will definitely dig into the specific definitions later because love in this framework isn't about romantic affection or generic kindness.
Okay, that makes more sense.
It's about a moral orientation toward truth over ego. But to answer your question broadly, ideas that fail these three specific tests, no matter how persuasively they're packaged or how many charts and graphs accompany them, they inevitably generate confusion, manipulation, and ultimately destruction.
So it's a structural test.
Exactly. The audit is a way of testing the structural integrity of an idea before you allow it to take up residence in your brain.
Think of your mind like a high-powered computer operating system. If you're listening to this, you have good hardware. The hardware is your raw intelligence, your processing speed. You don't need a hardware upgrade.
Right. The hardware's fine.
The problem we're discussing today is the software. There are hidden errors, invisible bugs in the code of our thinking. And when your system gets overloaded with the insane volume of modern media, those bugs cause the entire system to crash. You start reacting instead of reasoning.
And a powerful computer running corrupted software is vastly more dangerous than a slow computer.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it executes errors at scale with terrifying speed. That is the landscape of modern discourse. High intelligence executing buggy cognitive software.
So before we can apply this triadic audit, this love, light, life filter, we have to understand the architecture of the machine we are trying to fix.
Yes, exactly.
We need to look at exactly how the mind operates, and more importantly, how modern propaganda deliberately exploits the vulnerabilities in that architecture.
To understand the vulnerability, we have to look at Thornberry's two-layer model of the mind. This is the foundational blueprint.
Let's get into it.
If you don't grasp this, the mechanics of modern manipulation will just remain invisible to you.
Let's pull up the blueprint then. Walk me through layer 1 versus layer 2.
So layer 1 is what we classify as operational cognition. This is your automatic, highly reactive mind.
The fast part.
Exactly. It's responsible for immediate perception, rapid emotional reactions, fast reasoning, and instant memory recall.
Give me an example of that in daily life.
Well, when you instantly recognize a friend's face in a crowded room, or when you instinctively jump back onto the curb because a car speeds past, that is layer 1 firing.
Right.
It is incredibly fast, requires almost zero conscious effort, and it is biologically essential.
It's the snap judgment layer. It's the part of my brain that constantly asks, what do I think? Or how do I feel about this right this exact second?
Yes. What do I think about this headline? Layer 1 hands you an immediate feeling.
Right.
What do I think about this politician? Layer 1 hands you an instant judgment. But the trade-off for that incredible speed is precision.
I see.
Layer 1 relies entirely on cognitive shortcuts, heuristics, and biases. Things like confirmation bias, the tendency to instantly favor information that confirms what you already believe that lives natively in layer 1.
Okay, let me ask the obvious question on behalf of everyone listening. Is layer 1 the villain here?
Not at all.
Because it sounds like this fast, biased, shortcut-taking mechanism is the source of all our terrible decisions. Like, should we be trying to suppress it?
No, layer 1 is your survival engine. If you had to slowly, deliberately, mathematically calculate every single decision you made from the moment you woke up.
Like how to tie my shoes?
Exactly. How to tie your shoes, how to read facial expressions, how to navigate traffic.
Yeah.
You'd be entirely paralyzed.
Yeah.
You wouldn't survive a single day. Evolution designed layer 1 to keep you alive in a physically dangerous environment.
Right. If I hear a twig snap in the woods behind me, I don't want to sit down and run a statistical analysis on the local predator population.
No, you definitely don't.
I just want my layer 1 to flood me with adrenaline so I can run.
Exactly. But here is the critical pivot of this entire discussion. We no longer live on the Savannah.
Right.
We no longer live in a purely physical environment of predators and prey. You and I live in a highly engineered, deliberately constructed digital and informational environment.
Which is a completely different landscape.
It is. And in an era driven by artificial intelligence, engagement algorithms, and a relentless 24/7 information cycle, relying only on your Savannah survival instincts, relying only on layer 1, is a catastrophic vulnerability.
Because the digital environment has been gamified to hack that exact reflex. It's like throwing digital snapping twigs at us all day long to keep our adrenaline pumping.
You are hitting on the core vulnerability right there, which brings us to layer 2.
Okay, what is layer 2?
If layer 1 is operational cognition, layer 2 is metacognition. It is the inner observer.
The inner observer.
Yes, this is the reflective, deliberate layer of the mind that is capable of monitoring the first layer.
So if layer 1 asks, what do I think? Layer 2 asks, why do I think this?
That distinction changes everything. Layer 2 is the part of your mind that watches your mind.
I love that phrasing.
It is the capacity to step outside your immediate hot-blooded reaction and say, wait a minute, why did that video make me so intensely furious? Or is this statistic actually true? Or am I just eager to believe it because it proves my side is right?
It introduces cognitive friction. It deliberately slows the machine down.
Exactly. It transforms human cognition from a closed automatic reaction loop into a self-correcting system.
Which is huge.
Without layer 2, whatever thought pops into your head is treated as an unquestionable fact.
Yeah.
You literally are your reactions. But with layer 2, your thoughts become hypotheses. They become objects that you can pick up, examine, and test.
Okay, this is where the sources get really fascinating. When we hear the word propaganda, I think most of us listening have a very specific, outdated image in our heads.
Oh, for sure.
We picture Soviet-era black and white posters, or a dictator giving a 3-hour speech, or some incredibly dense political manifesto. We think of propaganda as an argument that is trying to convince us of an ideology.
And holding on to that outdated definition is exactly what makes modern populations so easy to control.
Wow, really?
Yes. Thornberry's analysis is brutal on this point.
Right.
Modern propaganda does not use arguments. It doesn't want to debate you.
Why not?
Because an argument, by its very nature, engages layer 2. An argument requires you to process logic, evaluate evidence, and reflect.
And the absolute last thing a manipulator wants is for you to reflect.
Exactly. Propaganda is a neurological shortcut. It is engineered to bypass layer 2 entirely and go straight for your layer 1 emotional reflexes.
It's aiming right for the Savannah brain.
Yes. It wants to trigger primal fear, moral outrage, and tribal identity. Because human neurology dictates that when you are enraged or when you are terrified, layer 2 shuts down.
The reflective brain goes dark.
And the reactive brain takes the wheel.
I use this analogy a lot, but it fits perfectly. Think about how a stage magician works. A magician doesn't actually have supernatural powers to make a coin vanish.
Right.
They rely on sleight of hand. And sleight of hand only works because the magician controls your attention and forces your brain to process visual information faster than it can evaluate it.
That's a great point.
They exploit the biological limits of your perception so you don't notice the trick happening right in front of you.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Propaganda is cognitive sleight of hand. It depends entirely on you moving too fast and feeling too much to notice the trick.
So how do they actually pull off the trick?
Well, the source material outlines 5 specific psychological habits that propaganda systems deliberately target and destroy to maintain narrative control. Let's look at how the sleight of hand is actually executed in daily life.
Let's pull these apart, not as a list, but as a sequence of behavioral hacks. Let's say I'm scrolling through social media on a Tuesday night. I see a headline that is aggressively criticizing a group of people I already dislike.
Okay, classic scenario.
My layer 1 loves it. I feel a rush of validation. I'm about to hit retweet. What is the very first psychological habit the system is trying to destroy right in that moment?
The system is trying to destroy your habit of pausing, the epistemic pause.
The pause.
Yes. Propaganda demands instant, frictionless emotional reaction. The platform's interface, the retweet button, the angry face reaction, it's all designed to close the gap between your emotional stimulus and your physical response.
There's a quote from the notes that summarizes this perfectly. Quote, "Propaganda succeeds when people react faster than they reflect." End quote.
Yes.
If I just stop my thumb for 2 seconds, if I take one deep breath, that's the epistemic pause.
Because in that 2-second pause, your layer 2 boots up. You start asking questions.
Like what?
Like, wait, who actually published this? Why are they using such extreme emotionally charged adjectives? Am I being played?
Right.
The pause is fatal to manipulation. Therefore, the entire architecture of our modern information ecosystem is designed to make pausing feel unnatural.
So let's say I do pause. I look closer at the article and I think, you know what, the data here is actually pretty weak. I decide to point this out to my friend who originally shared it.
Okay.
But suddenly my friend gets incredibly defensive. They aren't arguing the facts with me. They're attacking my character. What just happened there?
You just collided with the destruction of the second habit, which is the ability to separate identity from belief. This is arguably the most devastating tool of modern manipulation.
It's so common now.
A healthy intellect treats beliefs as tools for understanding reality. If you have a tool and you realize it's broken, you throw it away and get a better tool. There's no emotional crisis.
Right. If I think my car gets 30 miles to the gallon and you prove to me it only gets 20, I don't cry. I just update my spreadsheet.
Exactly. But propaganda doesn't allow beliefs to remain tools. It turns ideas into tribal signals. It deliberately fuses the belief to your personal identity.
So if I question the belief, I am no longer just examining a tool. I'm attacking who you are.
Yes. And evolutionary psychology tells us that the brain processes social rejection and tribal exile using the exact same neural pathways that it uses to process physical pain.
Wow.
To your Savannah brain, being cast out of the tribe means you will starve to death. So when propaganda fuses a political narrative to your tribal identity, questioning that narrative suddenly feels like a mortal threat.
You aren't defending a tax policy or a health mandate anymore?
No, you are fighting for your survival within your peer group.
Which means rational debate is entirely off the table. If I push back on your post, you feel like I'm trying to exile you. This explains so much about why comment sections instantly devolve into apocalyptic warfare.
Completely.
The system frames everything as a test of moral purity to ensure you never, ever let go of the belief.
And because you are terrified of losing your tribal standing, you stop looking for the truth and you start relying on the telephone game. You abandon the habit of seeking primary evidence.
That's the third casualty, but let me play the skeptic here. We are all exhausted. We all have jobs, families, responsibilities.
Sure.
I don't have time to go read a 400-page congressional bill or dig up the original peer-reviewed methodology for every single headline I see. Isn't relying on secondary sources just a necessary survival tactic in the modern world?
It is necessary to rely on summaries, yes. But it is disastrous to surrender the habit of tracing origins.
The habit is what matters.
Right. Intellectually resilient people maintain a baseline curiosity about where information comes from. Propaganda relies on the everybody knows phenomenon. It generates reality through sheer repetition. Catchy slogans, sensational headlines, memes repeated millions of times.
People are saying.
Exactly. People say. But if you engage your layer 2 and ask, wait, where did this specific claim actually originate? Can I see the raw video, not just the 10-second clipped version? You almost always find a murky, distorted trail.
It's a house of cards.
Propaganda banks on the statistical probability that 99% of people will not click through to the primary source. If you lose the reflex to occasionally check the basement, people can sell you any kind of house they want.
And if you do check the basement and you find out the foundation is rotting, you run into the next major hurdle. Let's say you realize you were wrong. The system has systematically destroyed your capacity for intellectual humility.
Humility is the absolute prerequisite for cognitive correction. It is the willingness to say, I might be wrong about this, or simply, I do not have enough information to have a strong opinion right now.
So rare.
But observe our current culture. Propaganda portrays humility as a weakness. It rewards absolute, unyielding certainty. It frames doubt as ignorance, or worse, as treason to the cause.
We see this constantly. There is this immense, crushing social pressure to have a loud, confident, bulletproof opinion on incredibly complex geopolitical conflicts or nuanced scientific breakthroughs exactly 5 minutes after they hit the news cycle.
Oh, yes.
If you say, I'm still learning about this, you are mocked for being uneducated or apathetic. It creates a culture of confident error.
Confident error. I want to highlight that phrase. When a society penalizes humility, the capacity to correct mistakes disappears. The narrative hardens into dogma. You become trapped in a prison of your own certainty.
And the mortar holding the bricks of that prison together is the final habit the system destroys, which is the ability to examine emotional triggers.
Every piece of persuasive media contains emotional cues. A reflective thinker, someone actively using layer 2, notices when a message is aggressively trying to make them feel something.
They can feel themselves being manipulated.
Yes. They feel the anger rising and they step back and ask, why did the author use that specific inflammatory adjective? What is their goal in making me feel this outrage?
But the digital environment floods the zone. It hits you with so many emotional cues simultaneously. Music, rapid-fire editing, visceral imagery, outrage-inducing captions that it just short-circuits the system. It overwhelms your processing capacity.
Look at all of these destroyed habits. Pausing before reacting. Separating identity from belief. Seeking primary sources, maintaining humility, examining emotional triggers.
It's all connected.
What do they all have in common? They all require metacognition.
Yeah.
They all require the ability to observe your own mind. When a propaganda system successfully weakens these habits across an entire population, that population no longer reasons independently. They simply react collectively. They become a herd.
Okay, that is a chilling diagnosis. We have this biologically necessary but highly vulnerable layer 1, and we are submerged in an information ecosystem precision-engineered to bypass our layer 2 defenses.
We are.
We are being hacked. So how do we rebuild the firewall?
This is where we move from diagnosing the illness to administering the cure. Because propaganda thrives in the unexamined darkness of automatic reactions. The very first step to debugging the mind is illumination. And this brings us to the first pillar of Thornberry's Triadic Audit, which is light.
Let's ground this concept, because light sounds like we are shifting into a theology seminar. How is light defined in this specific cognitive framework?
It is crucial not to view light as esoteric. In Thornberry's ontology, light is defined strictly as epistemic clarity. It is the disclosure of reality. It is coherence, rationality, and intellectual honesty.
It's the mechanism that makes the invisible errors visible.
Yes. Think about how modern manipulation actually functions. It rarely stands up in the public square and says, "Hello, I am alive, please believe me." It operates by obscuring the truth. It acts like fog or static noise, or a funhouse mirror. It creates these massive information storms so that you cannot accurately perceive the landscape.
It's not usually a blatant rejection of the light. It's a deliberate attempt to block it out with overwhelming noise.
Exactly. So the function of light in this framework is revelatory. It pierces the fog. When you apply the pillar of light to a narrative, you are asking a piercing question. Is this idea illuminating reality, providing context, and clarifying the situation? Or is it deliberately obscuring reality, hiding context, and relying on emotional distortion?
But here's where the source material introduces an incredible paradigm shift. When most of us think about bringing light to a situation, we immediately think about external fact-checking.
Yes, we do.
We think about shining a high-powered flashlight on the news article or the politician's speech or the corporate press release to see if they are lying. But Thornberry argues that true metacognition requires you to turn the light inward.
This is the hardest part of the entire framework.
It's not just about examining the external claim. It's about aggressively examining the internal interpretive framework, the mental lens through which you are reading that claim.
Let's break down the mechanics of that lens. Most people walk through life with the implicit assumption that they are perceiving reality directly.
That's our default state.
They look out at the world, they read a news story, and they think, I am seeing things exactly as they objectively are. But neurobiologically and psychologically, we aren't.
We're really not.
We are looking through a complex, highly distorted lens composed of our past traumas, our cultural conditioning, our current emotional state, our cognitive biases, and our tribal loyalties.
Let me give an analogy to make this visceral. Imagine I am wearing glasses with heavily tinted red lenses. I look at a completely white wall and I perceive it as red.
Right.
You come along and tell me the wall is white. We will argue all day long. I will call you a liar. I will genuinely, passionately believe I am right because, from my perspective, the wall is red. External fact-checking doesn't help me.
Not at all.
You can show me paint samples, you can bring in scientists, but until I realize that I am wearing red glasses, I am trapped in my delusion.
That is the perfect visualization of cognitive distortion.
Yeah.
Turning the light inward means recognizing, first and foremost, that you are wearing glasses. It means taking them off and inspecting the lens.
Which is really uncomfortable.
You have to ask yourself deeply uncomfortable questions. Are my glasses tinted by a fear of losing my status? Are they heavily tinted by my political identity? Am I misinterpreting this data because I have a deep-seated grievance against the person presenting it?
I want to pause the conversation right here and pose a question directly to you listening to this right now. Think about your most closely held political or social belief. Are you assuming your mental lens is a perfect reflection of reality? Or are you willing to take the glasses off and examine the lens itself?
It's a vital question.
Because if you cannot examine your own lens, you cannot access light. You are a prisoner of your own subjective distortion, entirely convinced that you are free.
And we have to acknowledge why so few people are willing to do this. Turning the light inward is an agonizing process. It's incredibly easy and even fun to point a flashlight at someone else's logical fallacies.
Oh yeah, we love doing that.
But it is devastating to shine it on your own cognitive distortions. Exposing your own biases requires you to confront the ways in which you have been foolish, gullible, or unfair.
Which is the perfect, necessary bridge to the next part of the framework. Because revealing the truth through light is only half the battle. Let's say you do the hard work. You shine the light inward, you examine your lens, and you realize, oh my God, I have been completely wrong about this core issue for 10 years.
Yeah.
Or worse, if I publicly accept this new fact, my friends, my peer group, my tribe are going to turn their backs on me. What happens then?
That is the point of ultimate crisis. And that is exactly why light, by itself, is insufficient. If you only have light, you might clearly see the objective truth, but you might actively choose to turn away from it because the social and psychological cost of accepting it is too high.
It's just too painful.
To actually embrace the truth, you need a different kind of strength. You need the second pillar of the triad, which is love.
Love. Now, again, we have to strip away the Hallmark card connotations here. We aren't talking about romance or a generic warm and fuzzy feeling toward humanity. In this philosophical and cognitive context, love has a very specific operational function.
It does. In this framework, love functions as the relational dimension of truth. It is the profound moral orientation that actively chooses truth over ego, over self-protection, and over tribal loyalty.
I find this conceptualization incredibly powerful because it acknowledges our biological reality. Human cognition is naturally defensive.
Highly defensive.
As we discussed with Layer 1, we are protective creatures. If a belief is deeply tied to your identity, say, your political party affiliation or your religious community, or even your professional reputation facing irrefutable contrary evidence, doesn't just feel like a math error. It triggers a genuine threat response.
Yes. As we noted earlier, the brain treats social rejection like physical injury. When light exposes a fatal flaw in a belief that anchors your identity, your operational cognition screams, danger, defend the perimeter, reject the evidence.
It's pure primal self-preservation.
Exactly, and love is the moral force that overrides that defensive, identity-protective reflex. Love is the courage to stand in the face of that internal alarm system and say, the truth matters more than my comfort. Reality matters more than my ego.
Wow.
It is the only thing that enables true intellectual humility. It is what allows a person to look at their peers and say, I don't know, or I was wrong, without feeling like their fundamental worth has been destroyed.
It completely detaches your ego from the equation. Let me try another analogy here. Imagine you are building a house. You pour the concrete foundation, you spend weeks framing the walls, you are proud of your work. And then an inspector comes along with a bright flashlight, light, and shows you that the foundation is fundamentally cracked. It is severely compromised. Now, your ego, your self-protection, desperately wants to say, no, it's fine, ignore the crack. I've already spent so much time and money building these walls. If I admit the foundation is bad, I look like a fool and I have to start all over.
Right, that's the ego talking.
That's ego. Love is the willingness to look at the house and say, this hurts, I am embarrassed. This is going to cost me dearly. But the house will collapse and hurt people if I don't tear down these walls and fix the foundation.
I love that framing.
Love is the will toward the truth of the structural integrity, elevating it over the ego of the builder.
That is precisely it. Love allows you to survive the demolition of your own errors. Without love, without that deeper moral orientation, you will just slap some drywall over the crack and hope for the best, because the ego cannot tolerate the humiliation of starting over.
And the sources detail the massive societal outcomes of this dynamic. They contrast the fruits of love with the fruits of its absence. When ideas and individuals pass the love test when they are oriented toward truth rather than defensive tribalism, they naturally produce cooperation.
Because they're connected to reality.
They reinforce human dignity, moral responsibility, compassion, and justice.
Because when people are operating with intellectual humility, they can actually hear one another. Their layer 2 is engaged. They can recognize a shared reality, which is the prerequisite for any functional society.
But when ideas fail the test, when they abandon love to protect ego, when they demand tribal purity above all else, they inevitably become tools of control. They produce deep division, dehumanization, hatred, and manipulation.
If you study the history of mass manipulation or the rise of any totalitarian ideology, you will see that they always systematically attempt to destroy love as a cognitive and social function.
It's a pattern.
The system demands absolute loyalty to the tribe over loyalty to the truth. It weaponizes the ego. It tells you if you admit you are wrong, you are betraying us. You are the enemy.
And that's how they lock you in.
And once a population accepts that premise, once it abandons the moral orientation of love, the light is permanently extinguished. And that society begins to rapidly tear itself apart.
So let's look at where we are. We have light to pierce the fog and reveal the objective truth. And we have love to give us the moral courage to accept that truth, even when it demands the painful demolition of our own ego.
Yeah.
But what is the ultimate result of all this? The goal isn't just to sit alone in a room in a state of enlightened humility, doing nothing.
No, truth cannot remain abstract. It must translate into action. It must manifest in the physical world. And this brings us to the third and final pillar of the Triadic Audit, which is life.
Life. Let's explore how this functions. When light reveals truth and love accepts it, it has to translate into tangible growth.
In the Thornberry framework, life represents the practical, real-world outcome of ideas. Ideas are not just invisible concepts floating in the ether. They have brutal physical consequences.
They really do.
Ideas dictate behavior, they build cultural norms, and they design the institutions that govern us.
They are the literal operating instructions for reality.
Precisely. And life, in this specific context, is defined as adaptive integration. Let's look at this through the lens of evolutionary biology. A living organism must continuously adapt to its changing environment in order to survive.
Right.
If the climate changes or a new predator emerges and the organism stubbornly refuses to adapt, it dies. Adaptation is the fundamental mechanism of survival.
And in intellectual and societal terms, adaptation is the mechanism of progress.
Exactly. When errors are successfully exposed by light and humbly accepted by love, new possibilities emerge. The system can finally correct itself. That continuous dynamic process of correcting errors and integrating new knowledge is what Thornberry defines as life. It is dynamic compounding growth.
So, to evaluate an idea under the pillar of life, you have to project its ultimate trajectory. I think this is a deeply practical exercise for you, the listener.
Oh, very much so.
Take any ideology, any political platform, any corporate strategy, or even a deeply held personal belief system, and subject it to the ultimate pragmatic test. Does the implementation of this idea produce health? Does it foster human growth, resilience, and epistemic progress?
Or the alternative.
Right. Or, if you play it out to its logical conclusion, does it generate destruction, social breakdown, and psychological fragmentation?
It is the ultimate reality check. Because a deeply flawed idea might survive for a decade if it is fiercely protected by tribalism and ego. But over a long enough timeline, reality always wins.
It's undefeated.
Distorted, unexamined ideas act like friction in an engine. They eventually erode the societies that hold them. They lead to rigid, inflexible ideologies, intense internal conflict, and eventually systemic collapse. To put it simply, truth ultimately produces life. Error ultimately produces decay.
Let's go back to our computer software analogy. A bad idea is like a memory leak or a virus in the code. You might not notice it on day one. The computer might still run your basic programs, but if you don't actively debug it, the invisible errors compound. It corrupts the surrounding files, it overloads the processor with junk tasks, and eventually the whole system just blue screens. Life is the state of a system that is constantly, relentlessly debugging itself so it can run efficiently and evolve to handle more complex tasks.
That continuous, fearless debugging process is the very essence of cognitive renewal.
Okay, we have thoroughly dismantled the conceptual triad. We've looked at the individual components. Light, which provides epistemic clarity and exposes the lens.
Yes.
Love, which provides the moral courage to detach from ego and accept hard truths.
Yes.
And life, which is the adaptive growth that results from that acceptance. But knowing how an engine works doesn't mean you know how to drive the car.
That's true.
How do we actually use this in the real world today when we open our phones or watch a debate or walk into a tense corporate meeting?
This is where we move from philosophical theory to daily integration. Because the true protective power of this framework, what Thornberry calls the triangular structure of discernment, emerges only when all three principles are operating simultaneously.
Right. They aren't isolated steps in a checklist. They are a unified, holistic filter.
Think about what happens if you try to rely on just one or two of the pillars. If you only have light, meaning you see the truth clearly, you understand the facts, you see the biases, but you entirely lack love, you become a cynic.
You just become detached.
You become detached and arrogant. You see the flaws in everyone and everything, but you have no moral drive to connect with people or help correct the system.
You just become a highly intelligent troll.
Exactly.
And conversely, if you have love, you're deeply empathetic. You desperately want to be a good person. You want to protect the vulnerable, but you lack light. You become incredibly naive.
You become the perfect mark.
You become the perfect mark for manipulation because you can't see the distortions. You will follow a completely false, destructive narrative right off a cliff, as long as it is dressed up in the language of compassion.
Exactly. Empathy without clarity is easily weaponized. And finally, if you seek life, you want growth, you want success, you want decisive action, but you lack both the moral compass of love and the clarity of light, you become a ruthless opportunist.
You just don't care who gets hurt.
You might build systems that are highly efficient, but they will be ultimately destructive and entirely detached from reality. You need all three forces operating in tandem to keep the mind balanced. When an idea or a news story or a political claim is examined through love, light, and life together, the fog clears and the engineered confusion of the modern information storm dissolves.
Let's give the listener the practical toolkit. We've talked about the theory, let's talk about the action. The text lays out 3 specific actionable practices that anyone can start applying immediately to cultivate this metacognitive awareness. Practice number 1, the epistemic pause.
This is the foundation of everything we've discussed. You cannot audit your mind if you are rushing. You must deliberately create a physical and mental space between a stimulus, a breaking news alert, a furious email from your boss, a highly controversial social media post, and your response.
Just stop. Take your hands off the keyboard. Take a breath.
Yes, it sounds almost too simple. But in that small 2-second space lives your entire cognitive freedom. That pause is the mechanical switch that allows Layer 2 to boot up. It interrupts the automatic emotional reflex of Layer 1. You have to train it like a muscle. Make it an unbreakable habit. Before you share a link, before you fire back a sarcastic reply, before you allow an external headline to dictate your internal emotional state, just pause.
Practice number 2, the triadic question.
Once you have successfully paused and engaged Layer 2, actively deploy the framework. Ask yourself the 3 questions. Does this idea align with love, light, and life?
Break it down for us.
Break it down. Does this piece of information illuminate reality? Or is it trying to obscure the facts with emotional noise? Am I reacting to this because I genuinely believe it's true? Or am I just eager to believe it because it flatters my ego or protects my tribe? And if the idea presented here were fully implemented in the real world, would it lead to human flourishing and growth? Or would it lead to division, hatred, and destruction?
It's like running a diagnostic antivirus scan on the thought before you let it execute, which leads directly to practice number 3, the debugging habit.
This is the ongoing daily maintenance of the mind. Regularly, aggressively examine your own beliefs and your own emotional reactions. Don't just audit the information coming in from the outside, audit the internal lens you're using to view it.
The red glasses.
Run a mental quality control system. When you find yourself getting irrationally angry about a topic or feeling a surge of smug superiority, use that emotion as a tripwire to look inward. Ask yourself, why is my Layer 1 reacting so violently here? What deep assumption or identity marker is being threatened?
There's a line from the notes that hit me so hard. Quote, intelligence isn't just production, it's quality control, end quote. We produce thousands of thoughts, opinions, and judgments every single day.
Constant production.
But we just let them roll off the assembly line and out into the world. We need to start inspecting them on the line before we ship them.
And this raises a monumental question about how this framework scales up. Because while this is a deeply personal, intimate practice, it has massive, world-altering institutional implications. Thornberry's work points out that the cultivation of metacognitive awareness cannot just remain a personal virtue for the highly motivated.
It can't just be a hobby.
No, it must be actively embedded into the infrastructure of our society.
Because institutions dictate the environment that shapes how we think. If the environment is toxic, individual willpower isn't enough.
Exactly. Think about our education system. We spend 2 decades teaching students what to think. We make them memorize historical dates, solve specific algorithmic math problems, and regurgitate data. But we almost never teach them how the machinery of thinking itself functions.
It's a huge blind spot.
We need to integrate reflective reasoning, cognitive bias recognition, and the absolute necessity of intellectual humility as core mandatory curricula from a young age.
And think about the institution of science. The scientific method is inherently a metacognitive process. It's designed to test hypotheses, expose errors, and revise theories based on new light. But scientists are human beings.
Yes, they are.
They have Savannah brains and Layer 1 biases too. The text suggests that scientific institutions must place a much heavier emphasis on recognizing the interpretive frameworks of the researchers, not just obsessing over the raw data collection.
And then there is the media. Media institutions hold immense power over public cognition. If media conglomerates continually rely on emotional framing, out-of-context quotes, and manufactured outrage to drive engagement metrics, they are actively, deliberately destroying the societal capacity for reflection.
They're profiting off the destruction of Layer 2.
We need a fundamental shift toward journalistic practices that prioritize radical transparency of evidence and strictly avoid emotionally manipulative framing.
And finally, the elephant in the room. Tech and AI. This is the big one. Our technological systems, our social media algorithms, our recommendation engines, they are currently explicitly designed to amplify emotional reactivity.
They are billion-dollar machines designed to exploit Layer 1.
If we have any hope of maintaining a resilient, sane society, these digital architectures must be fundamentally redesigned. They need to be optimized to encourage critical reflection and epistemic pauses, rather than optimizing for emotional contagion and outrage.
It is a staggering systemic challenge. But a system is just a collection of individuals. Changing the system always begins with the individual mind learning to observe and correct itself.
So let's bring this all together. What does this all mean for you, listening right now? The most profound philosophical insight I take away from this deep dive is a complete redefinition of what it actually means to be smart.
It changes everything.
We have been conditioned to think of intelligence purely as raw processing power. The ability to do complex calculus, or memorize vast encyclopedias of information, or outmaneuver an opponent in a debate. But this framework suggests something completely different and far more demanding.
It suggests that raw intelligence is merely a tool, and without metacognition, it is a dangerous one. True intelligence is not simply the accumulation of knowledge. True intelligence is the ability to examine your own ideas, to filter out the noise of your own ego, and to consistently align your mind with the truth.
It's quality control.
It is the capacity for relentless self-correction.
I want to highlight a quote we touched on earlier because it is the thesis of this entire exploration. Quote, "Intelligence solves problems. Higher intelligence studies the problem solver."
That is the ultimate distillation of metacognition. And as Thornberry emphasizes, cultivating this level of awareness isn't just a matter of personal self-improvement or feeling intellectually superior. It is critical civilizational infrastructure.
The stakes are incredibly high.
The ability of a population to reflect, to pause, to examine its own deeply held assumptions. That is the very dividing line between a free, resilient society and a manipulated captive one.
If we lose the ability to examine the lens of our own thinking, we lose our freedom. It is truly that simple.
Without layer 2, we just become programmable nodes in a massive reactive network, steered effortlessly by whatever emotional trigger the algorithm pulls next.
Which is exactly why we want to challenge you, the listener, to actively start this process today. Do not wait for the tech companies to change their algorithms. Cultivate that epistemic pause the next time you open your phone.
Start today.
Ask the triadic question of love, light, and life when you read the news tonight. Begin the hard, uncomfortable work of debugging your mind. And be sure to subscribe and follow the show because we are going to continue exploring these crucial concepts, diving deep into cognitive clarity and equipping you with the tools to resist the manipulation of the modern information environment.
The more thoroughly we understand the hidden architecture of our own minds, the better equipped we are to navigate the extreme complexities of this age.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've unpacked today. We are rapidly entering an era where artificial intelligence is becoming exponentially more powerful. Very soon, AI will be entirely capable of handling almost all of our Layer 1 operational thinking.
It already is in many ways.
It will solve our complex logistical problems, it will summarize our news, it will draft our communications, and it will make our basic daily analytical decisions faster and better than we ever could. And as the machine fully takes over the mechanics of thinking, it forces a profound, almost existential question.
Yeah.
Will our Layer 2 capacity, our ability to pause, to observe, to possess the moral orientation of love, and to independently choose the light of truth, will that become the single, solitary, remaining definition of what it actually means to be human?
That is a staggering question to confront. If the machine is doing the thinking, the human must evolve to become the observer.
We started today by talking about the broken, distorted lens of modern information, the murky waters of trying to find the truth when there is so much data and so much deliberate manipulation. The Triadic Audit, love, light, and life is how we clear the water. It's how we fix the lens. The truth is out there, but we have to ensure the mind is prepared to receive it.